Hi, I'm Dustin Abbott, and I'm here to give you the standard review of the brand new Sigma 85mm F1.4 DN, made specifically for mirrorless art series lens. And I'm really excited to see Sigma not only design this lens specifically for mirrorless, but also to see them kind of reversing the trend that I've seen to where their lenses have been ever larger. And so in the pursuit of optical perfection, making increasingly large lenses that frankly I think that many photographers just don't want to deal with the size and the bulk of those lenses. And so they have managed to deliver us a new 85mm f1.4 that is half the weight, literally, of the previous generation art series lens. But also it's about 50% shorter as well, and so it gives us a much more compact lens while still giving us a lot of that optical performance that we have loved about the previous art series 85mm lens. I'm actually filming right now on this new Sigma 85mm f1.4 DN lens on a Sony A9, and so you can get a sense of the video performance and how well consistently it does in tracking my face during this episode here. Now today we're doing the standard review. If you would like more information, that really the nitty-gritty on the image quality and a comparison to the G Master lens, the previous generation art series lens, and then also the Samyang AF 85mm f1.4, check out the definitive review. It takes you a little bit longer, but it will give you lots of information to help you to make an informed decision as to whether or not this is a lens that should end up in your kit. So we'll start by taking a look at what has changed here in terms of the build and design. As mentioned, the weight has been significantly reduced, and so now we are in the range of around 630-ish grams compared to about 1,230 grams on the previous FE version of the art series lens, and so we've got half the weight, and the overall length has been reduced to where we're just that range, and we've dropped down from an 86mm front filter thread to a 77mm front filter thread. And yet Sigma has managed to give us more features rather than less in that size reduction. We've got a more serious weather sealing effort here, starting at the gasket, some internal seals, and some coating on the front element. Beyond that, we now have all of the features that you find on the GM lens. And so that includes an aperture ring with a unique feature I've never seen before, an aperture lock. And so you can use that to do one of two things. You can either lock it from going into the auto mode if you want to manually control aperture and you want to avoid going all the way over into the A position. You can lock it from doing that, but you can also lock it in the A position. And so if you don't want to mess with the manual aperture at all, you can lock it in the A position, and once you've clicked that lock, you don't have to worry about bumping it to where you would inadvertently manually select an aperture. And so it gives you kind of a best of both worlds. You also get the best of both worlds with the aperture ring in that you can choose to have it clicked at 1/3 stop to tense, which is typically the way I like to use it. But you can also declick it, just as you can on the GM lenses, allowing you to smoothly rack through all of the aperture options there, which can be very useful for video work. And so kudos to them on that. There is an AF/MF switch on the side of the barrel to allow you quick access to that feature. And then beyond that, there is also a focus hold button, just like you find on the native Sony lenses. The actual manual focus ring is nice and wide and has a good damping to it. It's not a bad lens to manually focus. It is focused by wire like all mirrorless lenses, so it's not like a true high-end manual focus lens, but it does a nice job there. So overall, the handling of the lens is really nice. It's got an upgraded lens hood that has a lot of nice textures, some soft touch, some ribbed areas. It also has a lock to keep you from inadvertently moving it, and so a really nice lens hood, a part of the equation as well. So top marks to Sigma on the build and the handling of the lens. It's a beautiful lens to handle, and of course that nice lightweight makes it now even a couple hundred grams lighter than the GM lens. Another heads up advantage that it has in that direct comparison. So I'm so thrilled to be able to give you a report on a new Sigma lens that I consider to be appropriately sized and weighted. Now the autofocus system, of course, is again designed from the ground up for mirrorless. So far, I have been pleased with all of the purposely designed FE lenses from Sigma that I have used. The autofocus motors are smooth, they're quiet, and they're nice and fast, and that's the case here. This is definitely a smoother focusing experience than what you find on the GM. The GM is a little bit harsh sounding sometimes in focus, at least for shooting stills. They do a better job of damping that focus motor during video pulls where it's actually nice and quiet. It's just as quiet as the Sigma in that setting, and they were very, very close in performance for focus pulls. We'll take a quick look at that so you can see here. So you can tell that the performance of those is fairly similar. And if I can compare that to the older FE lens, we'll take a look at this. You'll see a lot more stepping action. You can tell it's not really designed for mirrorless autofocus. So definitely the new stepping motor is an improvement over the older. It's also faster. It's faster than any of these 85mm f1.4 lenses for actually achieving and locking focus. Pretty much instantaneous. You're not going to be waiting around for focus. I also found my focus consistency to be good. There's a few little glitches I encountered along the way that I have been assured are due to the fact that I'm using a pre-retail firmware in this lens, and so what's shipping to retailers has a final firmware that is going to iron some of those out. And of course, it's very nice here that on a Sony, the Sigma lenses can receive firmware updates just via the camera, just like any kind of native Sony lens if they want to continue to tweak firmware moving ahead. But those quirks have included every now and then, getting frozen where it doesn't want to autofocus, and also having some reluctance to focus on a foreground object if the background's kind of busy. That latter, criticism is one, if you've been watching my reviews, I pretty commonly have that. I think that there's area for improvement in that, but I think that Sigma will improve on that with firmware update. I also noted when shooting some segments like this, particularly on my A7R Mark III, less so on the A9, that I did get a few, extra focus moves as a part of a static shot like this, where the focus should just stay locked on my face. I saw it did a little, micro pulsing every now and then. And so I think that's another thing that maybe firmware will iron out as a part of it. But overall, high marks on autofocus as well. It focuses extremely well. So how about the image quality? Well, first of all, it's pretty obvious where Sigma's compromise came for making this lens work in a much smaller body like this, and that is when it comes to distortion. Whereas the 85mm art lens previous generation had essentially no discernible distortion and very little vignette comparatively. This new lens has both of those things. It has pretty strong amounts of pincushion distortion and fairly strong vignette. Now the vignette is not out of line with what I've seen with some other lenses. It is heavier than the GM, or as I've said, the previous Art Series lens, but certainly no heavier than what I've seen on some of the Zeiss options. And so both of those things obviously will need correction, and so you'll get in-camera profiling, and there is even some embedded raw profiling, but the distortion is not completely corrected. We're going to be waiting on a profile to come to Adobe or whatever your favorite software is to permanently allow that. The good news is that I know we'll get good results in the end, because if you look at JPEG results, comparing them to the RAWs, the JPEGs are very nicely corrected. And so I don't think it's going to be a big long-term problem, but that is the optical compromise there. Beyond that, however, I was really pleasantly surprised to see that while there is some give and take across the frame, this lens is competing very strongly with both the GM and the previous generation Art Series lens, a very high resolving lens. And so we're getting very top tier optical performance from wide open. And so even wide open, again, depending on where you look, either center, mid frame, or edges of the frame, there is give and take with the other lenses, but very, very close performance. And then you stop down the lens and it is just razor sharp. Now that's when chart testing it. In real world, I actually prefer the image quality from the previous generation Art Series lens. An interesting quirk about the Art Series lens is that while it tested very well for chromatic aberration control in the lab, out in real world, in real world lighting conditions, it actually had a fair bit of chromatic aberration in bright, high contrast situations. And because those are much better corrected in this new DN lens, I actually find that real world images to me look sharper, and you even get nicer bokeh quality out of it. And I definitely prefer the bokeh, not by a huge margin, but by definitely a margin from the new lens. It also doesn't suffer as the previous generation lens did by being less than 85 millimeters, and so the magnification level is a little bit lower. Bokeh is a little bit less soft when I would compare it to other lenses. And so what you're getting here is a better performance, higher level of magnification, probably somewhere about 0.13 times magnification, I would say, or 0.135 times, but very close to the top of the tier for an 85 millimeter f1.4 lens. And the bokeh quality is really nice, very soft, and it's been pleasing in every situation I've put it in. And because you get good IAF performance and great sharpness and then nice bokeh, this is going to be a killer portrait lens, great wedding lens, and I actually used it at a wedding. The only thing that I didn't like, of course, is that some shots of like the building that was the backdrop for the wedding, it was an outdoor wedding, but when I had very straight lines near the edge of the frame, you could see some of that pincushion distortion there. Wasn't there, of course, in the JPEGs, but in the RAW files I could see it, and there's no correction profile yet, so I had to manually correct for it. Once that's solved, however, this is going to be a fab lens for that application, and so much more convenient to carry around. So at the end of the day, Sigma is pricing this at $1099 US. Obviously the price will vary according to your market, but they are pricing it basically at the same place as the previous Art Series lens. I personally feel like you're getting a better, but definitely a more usable lens for your money. And when you compare it to the GM lens, it's got all the same features. It delivers a similar level of optical performance. I would say marginally better autofocus performance. So I think that this is definitely a very valid alternative to the G Master lens, and one I think that a lot of you should seriously consider if you're looking for an 85 millimeter portrait or event lens to put into your bag and you shoot Sony, or of course on Leica as well. I'm Dustin Abbott, and if you look in the description down below, you can see linkage to my full text review, also to an image gallery. Check out some photos. It produces a lot of beautiful ones. And beyond that, there are buying links there, though because this lens is brand new, it may take a few weeks for some of those links to populate, so be patient with that as retailers are just now getting their listings up for it. Beyond that, however, there is linkage to follow me on social media or to become a patron, to sign up for my newsletter, and if you haven't already, please click that subscribe button right here on YouTube. Thanks for watching. Have a great day.